And then they had done their work. As Benjamin Franklin said, we could come back next year and maybe we'd come up with something better. But I have lived a long life and nothing human is perfect. Send it out to the people, and they did. And that debate called forth again in this infant country, without Oxford and Cambridge to guide it. In fact, you know the one professional group that was not represented at the Constitutional Convention? Professors. That must account for something. The most learned Constitution in history was drafted by the professors, and it was the Weimar Constitution. So not a professor there, but the ordinary people debated it, and it called forth the Federalist. That set of writings by Madison and Hamilton and John Jay that is worthy to rank along Aristotle and Plato. And the people ratified it. They ratified this testament to our political freedom, as they had celebrated the Declaration of Independence as a foundation of our national freedom. But in the ratifying process, the ordinary American began to say, wait a minute, there's a third component here to freedom. It's called individual freedom. We don't see that represented here. Why? Well, various answers were given, none of them satisfactory. And state after state said they would ratify on the word, that the first Congress would take as its most important task the drafting of a Bill of Rights to secure the individual freedom. Now, would you entrust your individual freedom to Congress on its word? Would you create this mammoth centralized national government and then let Congress just say, oh yes, we promise, as soon as we get to Washington, we're going to give you a Bill of Rights? First of all, you couldn't create one today anyway with all the vested interests. That first Congress was the real decisive factor. Would this Constitution really work? And they're the great founders. They sat down and in that first congressional period created that Bill of Rights to send out to the states that still guarantees our freedom every day. And they start with your most precious product, your mind. No one can control it. Your freedom to think what you want, to say what you want, and to come together peaceably to change things. So the Bill of Rights, but that wasn't enough for them. They then put into effect the Northwest Ordinance, where great states like Michigan were brought into this new national government under conditions unheard of in antiquity. They would not be colonies. They would be free republics. That's how you really spread freedom. And in the Northwest Territories, slavery was to be forever forbidden. And then finally, though, there was that financial crisis. And that had to be solved or nothing would matter. Credit had to be unfrozen. And this was a task that George Washington assigned to Alexander Hamilton, first Secretary of Treasury, to get Congress to go along with, because Congress had to do it. Hamilton was a man with broad national vision. Illegitimate child, born in the West Indies. He wasn't attached to any states. In fact, he thought they all ought to be abolished. He had a financial mind. And he listened to the best financial minds of the day. Men like Robert Morris, who had financed this revolution. And the first step was, what do we do about our debts? For our debts amounted to $73 million. Now, in terms of inflation, and in terms of a country's ability in those days without an income tax to raise money, that's about like our national deficit now. And it fell into three parts. One, the debts we owed Holland and France for bankrolling our revolution, about $12 million. The debts that the Continental Congress had made to merchants and others. And then the debts that the states had taken upon themselves. The $12 million to Holland and France, foreign debts, that was a debt of honor. Can you imagine anyone today seriously talking about a debt of honor? Can you imagine the head of some mutual firm saying, you've lost your child's college account, so it's a debt of honor that we're going to send them through college? Are they going to do that? No. But this is the debt of honor. And it was going to be paid in hard gold and silver. So that was done. But then, the debts that Congress had made, those were made and mostly bought up by speculators. You had paid 1 cent for a $100 bond. Now, should you be paid $100 in gold for what you've been paid 1 cent for? No. We weren't going to finance all these speculators. Well, Hamilton argued again and again, we must establish a sound credit. An investor must believe if he buys a $100 bond, he will be paid $100 in gold. Do you understand that? All right, we finally gave in on that. Where are we going to get all this money? We'll get it. All right. Then the debts of the states. That was the hardest of all, because Virginia had very frugally paid off all its debts, and South Carolina, Massachusetts, they hadn't paid off any. And Virginia said, why should we pay off the debts of South Carolina and Massachusetts? Hamilton tried to say, because you're all one country. We know that, but it still doesn't matter. We're not taking their debts. You got to get this done. And George Washington called together Hamilton, Robert Morris, and Jefferson. And he said, boys, I want this settled this afternoon. And they walked up and down. And Jefferson said, I know the best will in the world. I understand what you mean, but Virginia's not going to pay for those debts. And Hamilton said, well, I have an idea. What if the new federal capital were to be located along the Potomac? Oh, that's a great idea. And Robert Morris said, wait a minute, it's going to be in Philadelphia. Everybody knows that. Yeah, well, do you want these debts paid or not? You know, you own a lot of these bonds yourself, Mr. Morris. Illinois. All right. Okay. But it has to be in Philadelphia for 10 years. Okay, so it was done. The debts of the states were paid off at full value in gold and silver. And we have this lovely city here along the Potomac. Philadelphia still is what it is. Wonderful city. There. It was done. Now that credit was laid so soundly that when the French Revolution broke out in that year, 1789, there was nowhere for European investors to put their money. And they looked at this new country with its sound credit rating, and the money flowed in to fund our prosperity. Now, is that not a Congress solving a set of problems, a Bill of Rights, settling the Northwest, and this financial crisis? That is what individuals of character can achieve. And it was not the sweep of history. The sweep of history was the French Revolution of 1789 that led to a terror. Aristocrats drowned in the river just for being aristocrats, and ended with the Emperor Napoleon, and war after war after war. That was the sweep of history. The sweep of history isn't towards freedom, it's towards the Russian Revolution. A democratic constitution set up, ending in a Stalin and 20 million people put to death. The sweep of history. The uniqueness of America is shown by 1933. In January of 1933, Germany, with its democratic Weimar Republic, its great tradition of thinkers about freedom, like the philosopher Hegel, with its writers like Goethe, spoke so movingly of the eternity of freedom, it would turn its destinies over in January of 1933 to Adolf Hitler, who in his Mein Kampf had said exactly what he was going to do: start a new war and rid Europe of the Jewish people. And in March of that same year, in the depths of this depression that the economists did not understand, after all, in 1929, the professor of economics at Yale said we had a new economic model that meant there would never again be a depression. We turned our destinies over to Franklin Roosevelt. And he spoke to the nation in that first inaugural address, which was practical and hard-headed, not about the sweep of history, but how he was going to solve this problem that was a true threat to freedom, our freedom.